is one of the most underrated animated movies that came out last year, in my oh so humble opinion. But I do think there is a deeper element to the story that not a lot of folks have touched on. That is to say that Nimona is the best trans story that I have ever seen. Now, queer media has come a long way in the last 20 or so years, but we still don't see a lot of trans characters or trans stories being told, especially in the animation world. That's why I want to dive just a little bit deeper into the story and explain exactly why Nimona is such a beautifully told allegory for the trans experience and why it's so important for these kinds of stories to be told. Warning, spoilers ahead. But before I get into the video for today, I would just like to thank today's sponsor, Aura. Over the last 3 months, I've had some somewhat serious medical problems come up with not only my family, but with myself as well. And for anyone who has ever been in this kind of situation before, you know how hard it is to sleep when you're worried about either your health or the health of a loved one. And that's why I started using Aura to help me fall asleep at night, and it's been working wonders. Aura is a mindfulness and sleep app that won the Best of Apple award and is used by over 7 million people. This all-in-one app for your sleep and well-being has thousands of meditations, stories, and much more like CBT, life coaching, breath work, and spirituality. I absolutely love the variety on this app. It has a little bit of everything, but I do have to say I am partial to many of the rain tracks made for sleep because that's the best thing that has helped me when nothing else has worked. Get started today for completely free on Aura's website using the link in the description box below. The first 500 people who sign up using my link will get a free trial and an exclusive 25% off. It's gonna be going fast, so be sure to be one of those first 500. And thank you again for Aura for sponsoring this video. On the surface, Nimona is a fun fantasy movie about an exiled knight and his shape-shifting sidekick trying to get him back into the good graces of the kingdom after he supposedly killed the queen. But if you take a look a little bit deeper, this movie is so trans. Which honestly, it makes a lot of sense as it is based off of a graphic novel written and illustrated by N.D. Stevenson, who has been documenting his transition through short illustrations and stories on his social media platforms for the past 5-6 years. But I think the most interesting thing about Nimona is that he actually wrote it before he came out as trans. And it really does show a lot of the fears and concerns trans folks have being out. When we first meet Nimona, she's shown to be a feisty, tough, quick-witted, and strong little girl. I think one of my favorite parts of this movie is when we get the first scene with Nimona and Ballister, and she asks him, how old does he think she is? And he's like 10. And she responds with, you haven't been around a lot of kids, have you? I feel that so much. But we as the audience are supposed to see her as this little kid who's giving off all of this vibrato, but not supposed to take her too seriously. And funnily enough, this actually does happen to a lot of trans kids who are not taken seriously about who they are at a young age. It's not until Bal gets arrested and Nimona comes to break him out that we get to see the real Nimona. And this is where we first get introduced to the underlying trans tones of this movie. Right before we see Nimona shapeshift for the first time, we see her ask Ballister not to freak out multiple times, and even after the warning, he still does exactly that when she shows him her true self, which unfortunately is something that does happen to a lot of trans people when they're first coming out. However, this is also the first time in the movie we get to see her be completely free in herself. With all the shifts that she does into the various animals throughout the scene, you can just feel the joy and happiness radiating off of her. The scene directly after this really does hit home, especially for me as a trans non-binary person. Again, we see Bal freaking out about what just happened, and when he asks her what she is, she simply replies, I'm Nimona, which is such a relatable thing for me. Oh my God. I remember being younger and told that I was growing up to be such a beautiful young woman, and I would just sit there and be like, no, I'm just Lynn, like, stop. So I really do feel her on this. He then goes on to call her a monster for her ability, and you can just see how hurt she is by him calling her that. This is something that also gets brought up multiple times in the movie. I think the theme of Nimona being called a monster or being compared to a monster is very pointed when but looking at her character from a trans perspective. Trans people as a whole have very negative stereotypes around being called monsters or freaks. We hear it in our news, movies, TV shows, pop culture in general, all about how trans folks are coming to hurt children or prey on cis women or infect kids into thinking they're trans too. Over the past 60 or so years, we have been shown in such a negative light to the general public that a lot of people really do think trans folks just shouldn't live simply because they are trans. And there are other people who think they're accepting but really aren't. This is perfectly highlighted in the scene with Nimona and Ballister in the subway car. He just stares at her while she's still in the gorilla form and asks if she can just be normal or appear human to make it easier for people to accept her. He even goes on to tell her that there's people who aren't as accepting as him out there, which I'm pretty sure she knows, but he doesn't see the small-mindedness of asking her not to be herself, which I'm very happy she calls him out for. And a lot of trans people experience that. We have people ask us to tone ourselves down just to make others around us more comfortable. And that's something this movie explores very, very well. We're shown all of Nimona's ups and downs of what it takes for her to be herself. We get to see in the flashback how she becomes friends with Glorith, who was accepting of her until her parents and townspeople found out what Nimona could do. We get to see her struggle with feelings of wanting to unalive herself and letting all the negative things people have said to her get to her. We get to see the vibrant energy she has whenever she shapeshifts and is able to truly be herself. I actually think Nimona herself said it best. I feel worse when I don't do it, like my insides are itchy. Then I shapeshift and I'm free. And honestly, it's such a wonderful thing to be able to see played out on screen. As a queer trans person, I didn't get to see this narrative a lot growing up. I sure as hell didn't have a good analogy to express how I was feeling. God, do I wish that I had that "my insides feel itchy" quote when I was younger. It honestly would have helped me explain so much. I didn't get to see people like myself stories get told. And I'm not gonna lie, I cried like a baby at the end of this movie because I felt everything that Nimona as a character has gone through. The isolation, the loneliness, the fear was perfectly wrapped up in this movie. The final scene with Nimona as a monster about to kill herself and Ballister placing his hand on her heart saying, "I see you, Nimona." I sobbed like a baby. Even writing the script, I started to tear up when I thought about that part. Because I think at the core of every single person on this planet, we just want to be seen for who we truly are. And I'm not going to speak for everyone in the trans community, I'm just going to speak for my own experience. Being seen for who I truly am is one of the greatest, most beautiful things that has ever happened to me. Because when I was younger, I never thought I could be myself for who I knew I was without being hated or judged or mistreated. And that's why stories like this are so important, because there are trans kids out there who have never heard of being trans and don't know why they feel differently, but they know they are. And seeing a character like this or a story like this can help those kids feel like they're not alone anymore and that it's okay. I'm not gonna lie, this movie did some healing for my inner trans child. Mostly because I wish that I had something like this when I was younger, to let me know that it's okay to be who you are. Being different isn't wrong. It doesn't make you a monster. And I hope everyone who watched this movie got a little bit more queer after watching it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts on Nimona and her transness in the comments down below. I really do think it's one of the best told trans stories that I've seen in a very, very long time. I also just love how subtle they are with it. And also, you don't have to be queer to enjoy this movie. I'm just queer and I enjoy this movie. Also, before you go, be sure to check out Aura and my link down in the description down below. And thank you again to Aura for sponsoring this video. Thank you all again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!